Hello, hello. Welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to see Isaiah Berlin and his concepts as related to political science, right? As related to political science. Now we are learning Isaiah Berlin in equality, but he and his concept of equality and his concept of liberty, we are learning him now because he has used a lot of concepts from across the political science. He gives reference from Rawls to Green to value relativism, then lexical order. Why we are studying him in here and not in liberty? Because he gives a lot of criticism of Rawls, and and we are reading him after Amartya Sen because the idea of capacity building, the idea of capability, and all these things, and value relativism as well, right? Amartya Sen talks about consequentialism. Similarly, Isaiah Berlin talks about value relativism, consequentialism, and value relativism. So going ahead, I have to explain. I have to explain the central concept in Isaiah Berlin's political philosophy. So, who was Isaiah Berlin? Isaiah Berlin was a Jew. He was a Jew. He was of time of Stalin's Russia, and his space was Russia. Of course, his space was Russia. So Isaiah Berlin belonged to a time and space of he belonged to time of Stalin and space of Russia. So during this time of Stalin's Russia, you see totalitarianism. You see totalitarianism across the world. Why totalitarianism across the world? Because fascism, Nazism, Stalinism, Peronism, Salazarism, all the isms or the totalitarian isms were during this period only. So he analyzed. So he analyzed why so much totalitarian states emerged during World War between World War One and World War Two during interwar period. That is his core concern. That is his core concern. That why totalitarianism emerged during interwar period. To analyze this, to analyze this as to why totalitarian emerged, he wrote this book or this essay, Two Concepts of Liberty. He wrote this essay, Two Concepts of Liberty, and he categorizes liberty in two types. First type of liberty is negative liberty, and second kind is positive liberty. Isaiah Berlin categorizes liberty in these two types, positive and negative. Negative liberty we have seen in Hobbes, whereby Hobbes says liberty is absence of external impediments to motion, right? Absence of interference by state, right? Law will define limitations of liberty. No law, no liberty. That Your liberty, your liberty is within walls of law. Hobbes say that liberty is absence of external impediments to motion. Hobbes say that liberty is absence of interference by state. This conception of negative liberty is supported by Isaiah Berlin. Then what is positive liberty? Positive liberty is capacity building. Capacity building. Remember T.S. Green? Remember T.S. Green and his concept of positive liberty says capacity building is liberty. State increases capacity of individuals to to enjoy more liberty. To enjoy more liberty. Positive liberty is basically capacity building, as explained by T.S. Green. When you say that state state will increase capacity of the individuals, when you say that state will increase capacity of individuals, what happens in the name of capacity building? That state enhances its own powers, right? State enhances its own powers. When state enhances its own power, it can become totalitarian, because in the name of capacity building, state can continuously enhance its power, right? That is the idea. In the name of capacity building, state will continuously enhance its power. So Isaiah Berlin says that negative liberty is a better kind of liberty because in the name of capacity building, state will continuously enhance its power. I will give you example of right. Example of negative liberty is very simple. It is Article 14 BNS, Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, or BNAS. These are negative liberties. Right? This define Article 14 BNS, BNAS define limits of the liberty. Right? This defines limits of liberty. Then DPSPs, let's say DPSP of Article 44, that is right to education. State will say, I will give free education to everyone within state who is under 14 years old. Right? Under this right to education, state will uh, create a budget. State will start spending on education. But what will happen with this spending of education is that state will have say on whatever that is taught in schools. Right? In the name of capacity building, state is state is exacting or increasing its hold on its people. If education is privatized, whatever you have to study will be decided by that private body. But if education is public, state will decide what is going to be taught. So in the name of capacity building, state can increase its own power. In the name of capacity building, state can increase and enhance its own power. State can become totalitarian. That is the idea. No law, no liberty. If state Negative liberty is basically absence of interference from state. Positive liberty is basically state will undertake capacity building, and under the name of capacity building, state will enhance its own power and become totalitarian. That is the difference between negative liberty and positive liberty. In negative liberty, remember Hobbes. in positive liberty. Remember T.H. Green, right? He himself gives a good example to explain negative liberty and positive liberty. For him, liberty is bird who is not in a cage. This is negative liberty. A bird who is not in a cage, but bird who is not in a cage, yet it is not flying. A bird who is not in a cage has liberty, but yet it is not flying, means it lacks capacity, right? He says that this capacity should be built on your own. This capacity should be built on your own. If you trade your original liberty for capacity building, for equality, you will be left with none. So that is the idea of of difference between liberty and capacity. So this is the two concepts of liberty as explained by Isaiah Berlin, right? This is two concepts of liberty as explained by Isaiah Berlin: positive liberty and negative liberty. Then Isaiah Berlin goes on to give his another concept of value pluralism. Value pluralism. What is value pluralism? Right? What is value? Value is a long lasting belief, right? It is a long lasting belief which shapes your attitude. What is value? Long lasting belief shaping your attitude. What is pluralism? What is pluralism? Acceptance of diversity, right? Acceptance of diversity. What is value? Value is long lasting belief which is shaping your attitude. What is pluralism? Accepting of diversity, acceptance of diversity, that is pluralism. And this acceptance of diversity is also known as toleration. So what is value pluralism? It is essentially acceptance of toleration of different values within a society, within a system. This word value pluralism, it is a doctrine of metaethics. It is a doctrine of metaethics. What is metaethics? You can understand that in your ethics lectures. But right, what is metaethics is basically understanding is what is ethics beyond ethics, right? Ethics beyond ethics, ethics behind ethics, right? What is metaethics? It is basically examining why a society has a particular ethical value at its core. Meta-analysis of a ethical value within a particular community. That is metaethics. It is basically metaethics. That you try to understand why a particular belief is held by a particular set of people, right? So he gives concept of value pluralism. He gives concept of value pluralism, whereby he says that values values should be plural. Values should have toleration within a within a within a society, right? Within a society. He says that this acceptance of diversity, Isaiah Berlin says that this acceptance of diversity or this toleration is at substantive heart of liberalism. Till now we were thinking liberty is a core value of liberalism. Berlin says that liberty is not core value of liberalism. Liberty is derivative value of toleration. Liberty is not core value. Liberty is derivative value of toleration. Liberty is derivative value of toleration. Right? What does this mean? What does derivative value mean? Liberty is derivative of toleration. It means that you need to be tolerant enough. You need to be tolerant enough to respect others' opinions and others' liberty to have opinions and liberty others' different way of life. Right? It is a derivative value. Liberty is a derivative value of toleration because you need to be tolerant enough to respect others' opinions, liberty, and way of life. So, liberty is not a core value of liberalism, it is actually toleration because you need to tolerant enough to respect others' liberty. You need to be tolerant enough to accept others' liberty, right? So, what is value pluralism? Value pluralism is basically the belief that the belief that within a society different values can exist together. There can be diversity of values within a society, and if there is diversity of value within a society, then s- acceptance of such diversity is toleration, and this toleration, Berlin says, is the substantive heart of liberalism. And he says that liberty is not core value of liberalism. Liberty is derivative value of toleration. That is why toleration stands at center of liberalism. What is toleration? It is basically you should be tolerant enough. You should be acceptive enough. You should have acceptance of others' opinion, others' liberty, and others' way of life. To explain toleration, I will write this one quote, whereby Voltaire, Voltaire, one of the fathers of French Revolution, says that I strongly desist your point of view, but I still would respect your right to put forward your point of view, even at cost of my life. Voltaire. So what does Voltaire say? I strongly desist your point of view, but I would still respect your right to put forward your point of view, even at cost of my life. Value pluralism. This is basically value pluralism, right? Even if I don't like your point of view, I would at least hear your point of view. I would at least hear your point of view, and I will defend your right to speak even at cost of my life. That is basically toleration. I am tolerant of your views, right? Then other person who talked about toleration before Isaiah Berlin was Mill, J.S. Mill, right? J.S. Mill, in his principle of freedom of speech and expression, we have seen, we have seen quotes like we cannot accept tyranny as we cannot accept tyranny of all over one, or one over all. We can also not accept tyranny of all over one. Even if someone is mad, we should accept their freedom of speech and expression, because you never know, you never know what will come out of that speech. Hannah Arendt says that every birth is every birth is beginning of something new. Every speech is banal. Every speech is not banal. Every speech is beginning of something new. So we should be very, very acceptance. We should have very much acceptance of tolerance, very much acceptance of liberty. We should be tolerant of others' liberty. We should be tolerant of others' liberty. If someone is gay, if someone is lesbian, right, with respect to gender, I am speaking, they have liberty of expressing their gender because society around them is tolerant enough to let them express their gender. Now, this expression of gender, which work in West, which society is tolerant, will not work in Middle East, will not work, may not work in, let's say, Pakistan, will not work in Bangladesh, because their societies are not tolerant enough. Societies need to be tolerant to to accept others' right to liberty, right? So this toleration, this toleration means even if I disagree, I will not oppose you. Even if I disagree, I will not oppose you. And toleration is essential feature of liberal societies with liberty and autonomy of self. Right, right. So what Berlin is essentially saying, what Berlin is essentially saying, that toleration is having freedom of choice. Having freedom of choice basically means that there is acceptance, or there is fact of reasonable pluralism. Pluralism. What is reasonable pluralism? As we have seen in Rawls gives this concept of reasonable pluralism, whereby different spheres of justice can have different different spheres of society can have different ideas of justice. That there is toleration of different principles of justice with respect to different spheres of society. Right? This idea of value pluralism thus basically talks about toleration, acceptance of diversity, and says liberty is not core value of liberalism. It is toleration, because toleration means you are accepting, people are accepting other right to liberty, others way of life, other right to liberty, others opinions. Voltaire we have seen in that regard. J.S. Mill we have seen, right? So what what does Berlin is trying to do by giving this concept of toleration, or they giving this concept of value pluralism? So this concept of value pluralism is basically criticism of totalitarianism, right? He says that he says that to avoid to avoid totalitarianism, he gives solution of value pluralism, that is acceptance of values, acceptance of diversity of values, right? What value pluralism is not, it is not number one value monism. Value pluralism is, it is not value monism. What is value monism, right? What is value monism? It is basically deontology. Value monism is saying that a single value is the is the ultimate determinant. Value monism is basically deontology and saying that a single value is ultimate determinant, right? Single value is ultimate determinant. Example: dignity for roles. This is value monism. Then it is what it is not. What value pluralism it is not. It is not value relativism. What is value relativism? Right? What is value relativism? It means that it means being neutral towards other values, right? Being neutral towards other values. For roles, you can see for roles, uh, his principle of justice, his theory of justice is for lived societies, liberal societies, and in political sphere. So Rawls is neutral. Rawls is relative. Rawls is giving his theory of justice, his principle of dignity, relative to liberal societies and in political sphere. Right? In liberal societies and in political sphere, what value relativism basically means that it is contextualism. It is contextualism, saying that within a particular sphere and within a particular society, there is going to be one principle of justice. This this idea is also not value pluralism. If value pluralism, it is not value monism and it is not value relativism, then what is it? Right? Then what is it? So value pluralism, it is not number one. It is not deontology. It is not value relativism. It is not relativism. It is not relativism. It is not deontology. It is not relativism by means it is not neutral towards values. It is not deontology or it is not relativism or neutrality towards value. What it is, value pluralism is basically toleration towards diversity of values. Value pluralism is basically diversity of values. If if we are tolerant towards diversity of values, it is value pluralism. right? This value pluralism, apart from being solution for totalitarianism, it is also a criticism of it is also a criticism of Rawls' theory of justice. It is criticism of Rawls' theory of justice. In particular, there is this concept of lexical order, whereby Rawls give hierarchy of values. He says that what Rawls says that maximum equal liberty is the most important value. Then he says that equality of opportunity is important, and then he says that greatest advantage to least advantage is important. This lexical order, this hierarchy of values, Isaiah Berlin criticizes. Isaiah Berlin criticizes this lexical order, this hierarchy of values, and says that you cannot you cannot establish hierarchy of values. Why you cannot establish hierarchy of values? Because values are, number one, incommensurable. I will explain this, don't worry. And values are inherently pluralistic. Values are inherently pluralistic, which means incommensurable means that they cannot be judged. They can't be judged, right? A value which is accepted in one society, it cannot be accepted in other societies. So commensurability, judgment of values should not be there, right? And what he means by values are inherently pluralistic, it means that values can have different meanings as well. What does this mean? Values can have different meanings. It means that it means that good woman, let's say this is a value. Now, is married woman a good woman, or is none a good woman? This is example as given by Isaiah Berlin. I can give another example as well, but still, good woman, married woman a good woman, or none is a good woman. There is no way to establish the superiority of one over each other. So values have inherently multiple meanings. Value of liberty. Let's take equality. Value of equality have multiple meanings. Equality of opportunity, equality of outcome, right? So values are inherently pluralistic. That is why we cannot establish lexical order hierarchy of values. Rawls established hierarchy of values, lexical order of values, whereby he says that maximum equal liberty is most important principle, then equality of opportunity, then greatest advantage to least advantage, which Berlin criticizes by saying that you cannot establish hierarchy, and says why you cannot establish hierarchy, because values are incommensurable, that they cannot be judged, and they are inherently pluralistic, meaning that values can have different meanings. Equality have different meanings of opportunity and outcome, right? So what basically he wants to say is things things can mean different for different people. Values can be different with respect to different societies. We should be tolerant towards any such diversity anywhere in the world. That is the whole point of Isaiah Berlin. I hope you understood him, and we conclude equality by finishing with Isaiah Berlin. I hope this helped. Thank you so much. Bye bye.